Howdy everyone, and today I'm taking a look at another lens for Canon's mirrorless EOS M system, the little EF-M 15 to 45mm f3.5 to 6.3 IS STM. Like all EF-M and other mirrorless lenses, it will only work on mirrorless cameras and not digital SLRs. Canon's other kit lens for the EOS M system, the 18 to 55mm, is a good enough optic, but has often come under some criticism for being too big to be ideally suitable as a mirrorless kit lens. Which is fair enough really, when you look at the rest of the mirrorless camera competition out there. Also, 18mm is not really a very wide angle on an APS-C camera. So, Canon's answer to this is the much smaller, retractable 15 to 45mm kit lens. When collapsed, and also in use, it's considerably smaller than the 18 to 55mm lens and offers a much wider angle of 15mm. Here's some footage showing the zoom ranges of the two lenses. As you can see, the 15 to 45mm starts off noticeably wider. But as we zoom in, the 18 to 55mm lens obviously pulls ahead. Personally, I much prefer to have a lens with a wider angle on offer, but it really depends on what kind of photography you're into. A slight setback though is that the 15 to 45mm lens only offers you a maximum aperture of f3.5 at the wide angle end, darkening to f6.3 as you zoom in, making it a pretty dark lens. And another problem with that dark aperture is that you'll find it even harder to get out of focus backgrounds. This is a lens that will give you fairly two-dimensional images, and if you're shooting indoors or in a dark place, you'll need to use a high ISO level on your camera to compensate. But then that's just the price you pay for having such a small zoom lens, really. Let's look at the build quality then. It's one of the smallest zoom lenses Canon have ever made, and with its plastic lens mount and body, it's also very light, but perhaps not very tough. The lens is retractable, meaning you must set it to its shooting position before use, as you can see here. The lens's zoom ring works fine, but it's not enormously smooth to turn. It sticks just a little, which is not ideal for video makers. The focus ring, however, works very smoothly. The focus mechanism is fully electronic, but when you turn that focus ring in manual focus mode, it works very responsively indeed, making the lens easy to manually focus if that's what you desire to do. The autofocus motor on this lens is silent, quick, and very accurate. The lens also has image stabilization to make your handheld video footage look smoother and get your still pictures sharper. Here's some footage without stabilization, and here it is turned on. As you can see, it's working reasonably efficiently and quietly, but actually I found the image stabilization in Canon's 18 to 55mm kit lens to be a fair bit smoother. Overall though, the lens is small, light and fun, and all its electronic functions are smooth and quiet. Let's see about picture quality. The 24 megapixel APS-C sensor of my Canon EOS M3 will set quite a challenge to just about any lens really. I've turned on peripheral illumination and chromatic aberration correction in the camera for these tests. At 15mm and f3.5, the lens is really sharp in the middle with good contrast. The corners are quite soft though. Stop down to f5.6 for a small improvement, and f8 for reasonably good sharpness in the corners. Stop the aperture down further than this and the image will just start to get softer due to the effect of diffraction. Let's see about the middle of the zoom range then. At 28mm, the maximum aperture has darkened to f4.5. The middle of the image, again, is very sharp, although the corners are noticeably soft. The situation is the same at f5.6, but there's more sharpness at f8. Stop down to f11 for another very slight improvement. Finally, let's zoom into 45mm. At that dark maximum aperture of f6.3, the lens, again, is very sharp in the middle. Resolution in the corners is not bad. Stop down to f8 and the corners are fairly good. Stop down to f11 for about the same performance. If you want, you could stop down further to f16 and we see that diffraction I was talking about really kicking in. And at 45mm, you can actually stop all the way down to f40. Although, as you can see here, you probably wouldn't want to. Overall, I'd heard from other reviewers that the 15 to 45mm lens is optically a bit inferior. It's really not too bad though. I discovered that it's always very sharp in the middle of its images, and reasonably sharp in its corners when you stop down the aperture to about f8. So it's an averagely good performance for a modern kit lens, maybe not quite as sharp as the 18 to 55 though. And let's take a look at distortion and vignetting. At 15mm, unsurprisingly, we see some quite clear barrel distortion. Nothing too horrific, but definitely noticeable. What is pretty horrific is the amount of vignetting at f3.5. Turn on peripheral illumination on your camera to see that reduced, but not entirely go away, until you stop down the aperture. Zoom in to 20mm and that distortion goes away, but we still have some gentle vignetting even with peripheral illumination. Zoom all the way into 45mm and oddly enough, we see some very gentle barrel distortion again, where you'd expect to see some pincushion distortion. There's much less vignetting though at 45mm. Let's see about close-up image quality. The lens can focus as closely as 25cm, which is pretty close, but other than that it's quite a poor show because at f6.3 the picture quality is extremely soft with very low contrast and ghosting. Stop down to f8 for a little improvement, and at f11 the picture is nice and clear, but perhaps not very sharp. Obviously then, this is not a good lens for close-up pictures. Let's see about work against bright lights. It's not a very good performance here really, with some flaring and loss of contrast, quite typical really. And finally then, let's see about bokeh. It's a slightly redundant question because the lens's dark aperture and shorter focal length make it very difficult to get out of focus backgrounds. When you get up close to your subject though, you can see some very nice smooth bokeh in your backgrounds. Overall, the little Canon 15 to 45mm kit lens is a reasonably good performer optically, with some issues though. It's capable of getting you pretty sharp images, especially when the aperture is topped down a bit. The two serious optical issues are that it does have heavy vignetting and very weak close-up picture quality. And considering its dark maximum aperture, it won't be a good lens for unlocking the creative potential of an APS-C camera. But its especially wide angle and portability make it a very nice option for landscape photographers, which I suppose must be why I particularly enjoyed using it. So which kit lens should you get, the 15 to 45 or the 18 to 55? There's not very much in it really, although there are differences. The 15 to 45mm lens is lovely and small, it's noticeably lighter than the 18 to 55 and it can give you a considerably wider field of view. The 18 to 55mm lens may be quite a bit bigger, but it lets in a little more light, can give you very slightly more background separation in your images, and can zoom in a bit closer to your subject. With its metal lens mount, it has slightly more durable build quality and a slightly smoother zoom ring. It's also cheaper at the moment and seems to have slightly better image stabilization, and I would say it's very slightly sharper than the 15 to 45mm. So the benefits of the 18 to 55mm lens rather outweigh those of the 15 to 45, but personally I'm keeping hold of the smaller lens because it's a bit of a dream come true for me for my landscape photography. I really like using my EOS M3 camera for landscape work, it does a great job and it's so small and light and portable. That's just my own preference though, have fun making up your own minds, you legions of EOS M3 system camera owners out there.